All right, we've got a good number of people here. Want to get started today. I want to first welcome you all to the webinar. I want to congratulate all of you that were up for election this year that won. Congratulations to you, and I'm sure in a hard-fought victory for many of you. Michael is happy. On the election front, like this is, when I think about MASB and our work going forward in upcoming months, you have to deal with the kind of election results within your community. And hopefully we will be the ones that you turn to try to navigate what that might look like. And for some, I think it's smooth transition and smooth sailing. For others, we clearly are going to have to deal with animosity. We don't have exact numbers around the state yet. I saw, some articles that have come out this week, but about the kind of where slates of candidates were successful, where they weren't successful, different issues. But, clearly we've had some kind of vitriol in our communities. We've had campaigns where slates or individuals were running against incumbent board members. And over the last, 18 months to 2 years, they, haven't been kind to local boards and superintendents. And in some cases, they didn't win and that community's fine. In other communities, maybe three, a couple, we'll probably see some boards flip in a majority from a mindset perspective anyways. But for a lot of them, we are seeing 1, 2, and 3 people get elected. And so now, that struggle is going to be to figure out how, from your perspective as a sitting board member that remains, do you now step forward and work with people that have really been not kind and downright mean at times? How do you work with them in a governance situation, which you're going to be forced to do in January? And they are going to have to come in and understand that school board governance is different than campaigning, that school board governance is not having personal agendas and trying to get those actions taken, that they're in fact, a member of a 7-member team. And, although there is an individual vote in every situation, there really isn't any individuals when it comes to the governance model that we use as school board members across this country, really, not even just in Michigan. And so I don't have the answers. I think in some places it's going to be, man, how do you even have conversations? I am looking to reach out. I was looking online for how we can find ways to assist all of you this week. And one of the things that, people were talking about is just civility. How do we treat each other at a board table going forward? And clearly we have our governance standards and they're on our website and you can always tap those, but I think we're at a higher level of agendas than when we ever have faced in the past. And so I am going to reach out, and I don't know that I'll get anywhere with it. I know Grand Valley State University has a center on civility. And I'm going to reach out to them and talk to them to say, like, what do they mean by that? What does that look like? If it's something that sounds good, is there a way to partner? Is it a way to train? Something that would give us additional resources to provide to all of you on, as you enter January, how do you even get to a point of having civil conversations at the board table with, and I'll say 2 groups now that, have been at odds with each other for months and months and months. And for those that are fortunate enough to not have that, and business as usual is what you're going to see, that's wonderful. And but as often is the case when you, whether you're in a school district and a teacher, or whether you're at MASB working with boards, often those that need the help the most are the ones that we end up having conversations about. And so it's just different place. And I got an email last night from my counterpart in Minnesota, and he had a board member raise the question of what could the Minnesota School Board Association do to help with partisan agendas and partisanship on local boards. And I think that's kind of what I'm talking about today. And, in my answer, and I said it probably isn't much help, but I think one of the tacks to take on this is it's not that we're against partisan agendas. We're against any personal agendas. Like we don't believe there's a place for people to come into a board, whether it's on firing the coach or firing a teacher or banning books or whatever item you want to pick, like, supporting the teachers, in collective bargaining, pick whatever issue you want. Like the idea is that it's a 7-member body and that we don't typically stand for personal agendas. So try to figure out a way to take the politics out of this and say that, we're not singling out what you bring to the table this year. 5 years ago, we had somebody got on the board and they wanted to do this and we didn't agree with that either. Like it's the agenda problem that we really face here. It's not about what the agenda is. It's about the fact that we shouldn't be having agendas in that. Yes, Michael, some groups are pushing for candidates to have party affiliation. We actually have a couple of states in the country that do that right now, 2 or 3. We have legislation that has been introduced in Michigan. It's actually out there in the current term. It never went anywhere, didn't get a hearing, but it was out there. And if you look back at the September issue of our Point Counterpoint in Leaderboard magazine, I wrote on that issue, and I will give great credit to Pete Wiltsey as a board member for taking the other side of the issue. Even though he's not all in on partisanship on boards, he was at least making the argument. So that is an issue that's out there. Nick, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I do. Before, MASB can do something, there's a certain set of folks that remember what the National Association did, and Michigan is still attached to that. And I think there's some, I don't know, interesting or creative way we have to, again, create the market for some people that now will be sitting on our board that won't have anything to do with the MASB until we can find a way to message what we're really about and disassociate ourselves from what was said in the past, because I think that's part of the challenge that we'll have, some of us will have in that area. So you might line up the most important training that we've had in 50 years, but to get somebody to actually open the email is another thing. So here, while at least I still have a leadership voice, I will probably try and get MASB in here to do some basic training and pull every lever I can to try and get this person or these folks to actually come. But beyond that, I think there is some sort of broader effort that I think MASB might need, at least for a subset of people that are newly elected that want nothing to do with a traditional school board association.
Nick, I appreciate you bringing that up, and I'll ask a question back. And I mean, I made the statements that we did. We did individual meetings with legislators that felt the same way as the new board members that you're talking about, and I felt that we had good conversations, and almost to a legislator, even the most conservative legislators, that were in the House last year or in the current year, really. Felt that our approach to trying to hold NSBA accountable and, kind of steer them in the right direction to get away from that partisanship was in many ways the right thing to do. I guess yes, we are still a member of NSBA. There is another national organization that has been created. We're also a member of that. The Council of State School Board Associations is what that is called. And we're trying to really figure out like where each organization is going and figure out which one makes the most sense for us organizationally. Do you think, that the question that I guess is that a foil or is that the reality, right? So like if I announced tomorrow that I was dropping out, that MASB was dropping out of NSBA, I mean, I've already stated that we didn't agree with what they said, thought it was heavy-handed.
Yeah,
the question becomes like, if we drop out tomorrow, will we get, not wholehearted, but like better engagement from new board, like, because that's worth the discussion, right? Like, and I'm not saying that we would end up doing that. There's other things at play. I don't want to get rid of a national voice. And while it was, I think they're still definitely in their own repair mode. They've hired now a multi-client firm to represent them. They've actually let go of all of their government relations staff. They let go of the interim executive director that was there. The government relations firm that they've hired is clearly understood as a bipartisan firm. And so like we still want advocacy in DC on issues that will come up in the new Congress and with the president. And so I hate completely separating from having a voice. Like there's value there. And so I'm just trying to figure out like, like how real it is and how much of it is just like, they tell you like, if anybody associated with NSBA. So MASB drops out. Do they actually say, oh yeah, 101 sounds like it's worth taking? Or
yeah, I don't mean that at all. I'm just looking to just remind folks that we have to be creative because, there are a lot of truths that aren't accepted right now. And, until they actually, experience that they have no control over what they think they have control over, at that point, they'll be okay. But what I'm saying, at least in my case, is the only creative way that I can think of to get folks to actually embrace what it is to be a board member, to take some of the most important training out there, the first 10 courses, is to break bread with them in the same room. If I can get them there with a representative from from MASB, that's the only creative way, because food connects, and that right now that's the only thing I can think of. And then even then, getting this type of person to the table is still a very difficult challenge, because anything traditional or whatever is a challenge. So I only bring that up because they may never even open an email from you. Which I want them to open. I want them to take the training, because the training isn't divisive in any way. So to get that message across, it's the only creative way I can think of, is to get them in a room with your staff. And they're not going to get in a car and go to Lansing. They're not going to, they're not going to go to a conference. So get them in our own comfortable building or in someone's home, for crying out loud. That's probably what it will take. I'm just reminding that we could set up the best training, and very compelling to 90%, but there are a lot of districts now that have that 10%. That truth is a troublesome thing right now.
No, I appreciate it. And I do think what you bring up is a good point for everybody, which is if you have board members that question status quo, how things are, the training, like whatever it is, they have their own mindset of what it is to be a board member. Any expectation that they will go out and attend a December CBA weekend or a winter, like they're not going to do that. So I do think your best bet in that situation will be to bring training to you, right? Like that's like, if you want them to go through the 100 classes or even 101, like it might be that your other, maybe it's 2 new board members and you've got 5 returning. Well, you're going to be in a situation where maybe those 5 are going to take 101 again, and maybe get your superintendent to, and because it's a group effort, then the 2 other people are going to be there, and we do it in your district. And it's a shared learning experience that, where you're breaking bread and doing other things. And that's your best effort to try to engage them, is to do it in that fashion, just so that it's a shared experience, as opposed to trying to expect that they're going to go out on their own and do it. And I think in many instances, even that won't work. But I think Nick, you're absolutely right. Like that's a good first way to think about trying to do it. Stan, I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Don. First of all, this has just not been a thing in our community. We have heard nothing about the NSBA letter, even going back to when it happened. So not a particular issue for us, but I think that we have some of the same concerns, at least I do, that Rick expressed. And one of the things that I'm trying to force myself to do is to allow our one new board member to show me who he really is and not who he was on the campaign trail. On the campaign trail, he ignored invitations from both the superintendent and me to meet and talk about what school board service is, to get connected with the district and various resources and so on. Just never replied at all. Showed up to one of our board meetings and basically accused every teacher in the district of sexualizing our students, and pointed to one cherry-picked website that shows that we're a middle of the pack district nationally, and said we should be ashamed of ourselves. Well, that's not a great start, and not a person I would expect, based on those things, to be a positive representative of the district to the community. But the vice president and I are meeting with him tonight, actually, for some new board member onboarding. And I am working really hard to keep an open mind going into that. He's been very responsive since his election, agreed to this onboarding meeting. We think he may have been pushed into some things during his campaign that aren't really him. And so I'm not going to schedule an MASB 101 for us now, because I want to meet with the guy and see how the guy really is. And I would worry that somebody who isn't going to even open emails from MASB might decide he's not going to show up for the board meeting when we schedule MASB 101 too. But I do think there's something that board presidents can do to help with one of your concerns, Nick, where people don't even open the email. I think we could take MASB's emails and recraft it and have it come from us, from somebody they know, and at least have a face-to-face with. And then we can say, look, we've been through this training. It was really helpful to me. It made me a better board member. I'd really recommend it. Whether that's actually going to help or not, I don't know, but at least they'd probably open the email.
Thanks, Dan. I encourage others to throw up their hands, and Susie, looks like you're raising your hand.
I just wondered if, I've been really impressed with the Comstock superintendent when he's been on these webinars, because he had indicated that he met with every candidate. So I'm assuming that's something he has done for several years on a regular basis. And I just wonder if superintendents would get on board that way. In my district, I've only been on the board 2 years. This is my second year. I taught in the district for 40 years. I did not come with an agenda other than to make things better. I mean, in all areas, communication, respect, all those, the positive things. And I'm the only one on the board that has taken the classes. And as a teacher, former teacher, I have found them to be outstanding. They align exactly with what I felt as a teacher. I just think they're way above and beyond what I ever expected. And I took them intentionally because I came with the employee background. So the frustration for me is trying to get other board members. I'm certified now. I took the full first year classes, and nobody else is doing it. And they think I'm cuckoo and I'm retired, so I can spend all this time. But you made it very easy because they were all virtual. And I hope you will. I'm trying to encourage you to do that again. I'm in, Northern Michigan, and I'm not that far from Lansing, but to come by myself, I've wanted to go to the conference, the annual conference, haven't done it yet because it's coming by myself. So I guess there's that aspect too. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments, and congratulations on your certification. And, I will, this may be horrible for me to say, but I do not believe our classes are the panacea for every board member, and that they are going to fix poor behavior on a board or poor behavior on a board member's part or fixed personal agendas. I think our team has put together some really good foundational teachings on what it is to be a board member. And I do think they provide great value. I think we do have to, we have to recognize that sometimes it's individuals' time and schedules and lives that get in the way of taking classes. And we have to respect that. Sometimes it is kind of proof in the pudding, right? Like they see other board members taking them and they see that improves that board member or that, and they're like, oh, maybe I should take one. I know my former board president from Grand Ledge is on today, and I know that historically Grand Ledge had not been very engaged in our classes, and Denise started taking them also as a former employee, and now has been able to convince a few others to look at them and take them. So I think it's just that kind of conversation like you're just talking about, and it doesn't happen overnight. That we don't, sometimes I've seen board members that take classes, and I don't think I'm not saying this is your case at all in Claire, Susie, but like they want to beat the board members that haven't taken the classes over the head with their knowledge, and that doesn't serve to want them to make them to take the classes. It has a detrimental effect. But so we will be continuing online classes and virtual classes, both teacher taught and completely asynchronous on their own pace. We actually in December will be doing a CBA weekend, and that is completely virtual and with teachers. And so we will continue to do that. I do think what Stan brought up is important in the sense, I think that first reaction with your new board members, districts have different varying degrees of onboarding for new board members. And it might be even time to think about how you do onboarding, even if you do it currently, and whether there's a way to do that different. And I think Stan's example of a person that was really negative to the staff in the district without probably knowing hardly any of the staff in the district. So I talked to one district that is kind of redoing their onboarding process this year. They ended up with 3 new people elected to their board, all who have been very hypercritical of the district. So like it's a 4-3 board now. And where they're starting their onboarding is initially with meetings with the superintendent and the administrative team to talk about what their responsibility and what they do are. And they're doing that with the building principals. And then they're doing that, I think, with some representative of the teachers to first acclimate those individuals to what's going on in the district, not what they've read, not what they saw on Facebook, but like from the people doing it, here's how committed we are, here's what we've done. And they're doing that even before they're getting into the board governance side. They're trying to bring those new board members in to appreciate the staff at the district and the hard work and what their focus has been, maybe how they've moved test results and achievement. And then they're still going to go into the governance and role of the board and all of that. And it's more time than they normally spend, but it's another approach to trying to bring people in and not first bring them in to say, here's how we do things in our district and here's how the board functions, here's how the soup, but try to get them just to approach it in a different way. So I think onboarding will be essential. It's essential. We push it for every district, even in the best of times, just to help board members understand their role. But I think even more important this year. John, and then Yasmin.
Yeah, when Susie had mentioned about not going to ALC because she would be the only one, and she seemed a little apprehensive to go to that, and got me thinking that since I've been doing this since 1999, and I've taken just about every class that there is, I would be happy to help out anybody who is thinking about going to any of these conferences and stuff, and show them the ropes and things like that. And I don't know if we should maybe even create like a ambassador group that can help individuals like this that may feel a little apprehensive about going and not knowing what to do and this and that.
Appreciate that offer, John. Yasmin? Oh, you're still muted.
We're there.
Okay, got it. Sorry
There you
about that.
go.
I just wanted to add too that a lot of the ISDs or local like CASPAs, they sometimes offer 101 classes or onboarding for all new members in the county, or some type of orientation, that if your new board members are hesitant to do something with your group, maybe kind of setting them as your designee to go to a county meeting or something to participate in this along with others that are throughout the county, maybe they'd be more willing to do that.
That's a great suggestion. And I would encourage you, for those that don't see that, I know, like I talked to 2 ISD soups last week that are, that are planning on doing something with 101 in their counties for new board members. If you don't see that or haven't seen that in your county, have either yourself or have your soup reach out to the ISD and say, hey, could we put this together in our county? Because that's another method that we would be happy to do that. If we can find people, we'll travel. So we of course enjoy interacting with our members. I failed to mention when we started the show, we do have both Brad Banasic, our legal counsel, and Deshandra Bedenfeld, our Assistant Director for Government Relations, on with us today too. So as we're talking, if you have questions, of course, Deshandra can talk about kind of the election outcome side of things. Brad, I know that you have been peppered with a number of election questions in the last week since the election. I don't know if there's any, kind of general things that you would like to share that you're hearing a lot that might save you future questions.
It's just generally the transitional issues on terms, Don, when you have an individual that was appointed to the board and you have a abbreviated term on the board that was a result of a vacated term. The transition from that individual elected to that abbreviated term, when that person starts, as compared to the candidates who were elected to the full terms. And there's always been confusion on that issue. And if you're elected to an abbreviated term, you take office as soon as the election results are certified by the Board of Canvassers. Whereas if you're elected to a full term, you wait until January 1st to take office. But in all cases, even if you're a re-elected board member or a newly elected board member, you have to make sure you file that acceptance of office within 10 days after receiving your notice of certification of the election results. That's the most important thing. And usually you take your oath of office at that same time you're filing your acceptance of office.
Thanks for that. Thinking about new board members, another item. During the last election cycle, we created a new board member webinar series. It was only shared with new board members. It wasn't, not that we were trying to exclude anybody, but we wanted them to feel like in an inclusive group that was there, and they wouldn't have to feel weird about asking questions or anything like that. That will be, and we'll share information, but that will be launching again in January this year. And so like in that case, they're an hour long. I think if I remember correctly, they're over the lunch period, similar to this one. And, I would encourage, like, that's a dip the toe in, right? There's no commitment, there's no cost. It's just like, hey, they're going to share with what MASB does. And we bring in, other association execs. So they even just learn the lay of the land and education about the other associations that your staff members are a part of. We talk about, our training. We talk about, all kinds of things related to being a new board member, roles and responsibilities and soup relationships. And so I would encourage you as seasoned board members, even for the most reluctant, we try to make that a low entrance barrier kind of thing, and just to engage them. And we got great feedback from new board members that participated last time around. No travel, no cost, just learn a little bit. And so be aware, watch for that in January and, you know, try to suggest to your new board members that they participate in that. Bob, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
A question I have. I've didn't take any classes, I was just thrown in as a board member when I started, and you had to go through and learn. I'm wondering, is there some way a district could say, we want a bylaw that in order to run for the board member, you have to take so many classes of MASB, just so you understand what's going on and what's expected of you, and you pay for that up front, and if you get elected, we'll reimburse you. Is that something, or is that against the law?
You can't do that, Bob. That would have to be a issue the legislature imposes. The local board doesn't have the authority to create that type of restriction in terms of getting elected to the school board.
Okay.
Bob, you see Susan posted, well, maybe you did, but she posted in the chat. What we do have is, because you can't set election requirements on people, that is the legislature's job. We do have a number of boards out there that do say once a person is elected that they have an expectation, it's in their bylaws often or in their operating procedures, that say it's an expectation of the board or a part of the board culture that in the first term of being elected or in the first year or the first 2 years, it varies by district, that they want that board member to be, to do the 100 level, the basic certification. Now, if they chose not to, you can't unelect them, you can't kick them off the board, like none of that actually happens. But when a board has created that culture, like some have referred to, that is, I mean, you can do it. And when that culture is there, often we have people that say, okay, I'm a part of this team and I'm going to do that same thing. I think in the past, and I've talked to lots of boards that have those, if somebody comes in with an axe to grind with the board, sometimes they don't participate in that, even though they put it in their bylaws. But others, try to go along to get along sort of thing, and they do that. So you can, as a district, try to go down that road and, see that. And I always try to tell people, and that's why I always say when things are going well on your board, that's the time to adopt governance standards and culture statements and board, requirements, because you all agree that they're good to do. Now, when you enter in January and things are not so good, or even if you did it now in preparation for January, people are going to be like, oh, you're singling me out, because I'm coming to the board. So just, yes, that there's some possibilities out there, but not to get to election. I did see an election question come up in here, Brad. Diane asked, if a newly elected board member fails to return their paperwork, what are the next steps? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Under law, if they don't file the acceptance of office within 10 days of receiving the certification of election, their position becomes vacant on the board. So you would have a vacancy if they did not file their paperwork. What you could do is you could appoint that person then to the vacancy. They just wouldn't be serving a full term at that point. They would just serve until the next election, and then they'd have to run for re-election for that abbreviated term. So that would be my suggestion. If you have a board member that does not meet that 10-day deadline, their position would be vacant, and then you can reappoint them to that vacancy.
Brad, have you actually encountered some districts, maybe just through mistakes, where that has happened?
I'm sure once or twice, not recently though.
Okay. Yeah, I just it's an interesting, I think you mentioned you can appoint that. I mean, one of the things, like if somebody does it, like that would be a risk, right? Is like, maybe it's somebody that has been critical, they don't file, and now there's an appointment, you decide to go in a different direction, and you risk, of course, the will of the people kind of vote situation. So I think you have to be careful in it, but it's good. I mean, I think you're giving them the good legal advice, just something for them to consider, to like, you better have real reasons not to help them get on the board if the people just voted them in.
Right, and I guess tied to that issue, sometimes you will have a vacancy to another term that occurs after the election. And then there would be some movement from your community to appoint, the unelected vote getters to that vacancy, the individual who received the highest votes but was not elected. But again, not a legal obligation to do that. You certainly could consider candidates that ran but were not elected, but for filling that vacancy, you can appoint anyone as long as they're an eligible board member.
Stan, I thought your hand was up again.
I put it back down, Don. I was just going to clarify with Brad that we don't have to appoint that person. If the reason they didn't correct, we don't have to appoint that person who didn't.
No, you don't. You don't. The thought is, you could.
Yeah.
If it was a, just a filing error, some school election coordinators may be better than others in communicating the responsibilities that newly elected candidates have in filing that paperwork, and but that is just an option. Yeah.
Because if the reason they didn't file it is because they're not paying enough attention and they're not responding to emails and so on and so forth, I'm not sure I want that person on my board.
Brad, I see Yvette just posted, I was appointed 2 years ago, now elected. Do I need to get that form filed within the next 2 days? And what is that form?
Yeah, so if you were recently elected, and assuming you ran for the abbreviated term, if you were appointed to that vacated term, that term, the form is the acceptance of office. It is a very short form. It just says, I accept the office of Board of Education member, but it has to be notarized and then returned back to the election coordinator.
And Brad, and Yvette, I don't know what, I didn't look up what district or county that you're in. Are we at a place where, at least in our more rural areas, that the election coordinator ends up being the county clerk's office, municipal clerk in many of our kind of city type school districts?
Yeah, that's generally the case. I would say more often than not, it is the county clerk in most school districts. I mean, obviously, if your district falls in one township, then it would be your township clerk. But if you're in multiple townships, then it likely the county clerk.
Yep, Yvette, I see you raised your hand.
And thank you for answering my question. So I'm in Oakland County. I'm from Southfield Public Schools. So from what I'm understanding, it will be emailed and or mailed, or I can just reach out to them to find out how was it communicated to me so that I can stay on top of that form.
Yeah, certainly no harm in reaching out to your county clerk. And I'm assuming Oakland is probably going to be a county where the certification is a little bit later than other counties. That would be my guess due to the size of it. So yeah, I would think most certifications are going to be provided this week, but it's possible it could bleed in the next week. But I'm assuming by the end of the week, you should receive that notice.
So Brad,
Okay.
I think you said it earlier and I think I missed it. And so others might have too, and Stan posted it. So it's not within 10 days of the elections. It's within 10 days of certification of the election within
Correct.
your school.
Yep, within 10, after you receive that notice of certification, you have 10 days to accept the office. And that 10-day does not apply to the oath of office. The acceptance of office, oath of office, two different things. And what a lot of boards will do when the board member comes in to accept the office, the executive assistant to the superintendent is a notary. They will take care of the acceptance of office and do the formal oath of office at that time, because the oath must be administered by a notary, clerk of the court, member of the legislature, or a judge. And then you can do a ceremonial oath at your organizational meeting in January if you want to do that.
Other questions that are out there, maybe not related to elections, maybe related to something else.
Well,
Related to
John,
the,
or Don, I'm sorry, Don, can you
Yeah,
speak
Ken.
to a little bit about the, because while we're dealing with some of the things on our individual school boards, at the same time, at the state level, things are also likely to change somewhat drastically with the new Democratic legislature. So in some cases, those are going to be diametrically opposite of each other on some issues, not all, but on some. So can you speak a little bit about what you see at the state level coming up?
Yeah, and I'll let DeShandria chime in as well. She and I were just talking about this. And, from MASB's perspective, and we're a nonpartisan organization, and I've been at this a long time, I always tend to like shared power, meaning the governor's office and their political affiliation is, I won't say irrelevant, but in my mind, a little bit. If I was subscribed to the Senate and the House being of different parties, even though I've lived much of my career without that being the case, like I feel that government at that point requires compromise. Things don't get railed through because there's no ability to rail something through quickly. I think you get better policy in that space. And so we've lived in a period of time where that hasn't been the case. And now we're switching parties, and it's still like it's a different party, but same situation. And the concerns that I have, I think back to 2010, 2012, we had Republican controlled House, Senate, and the governor's office. And after years of work, we were able to get some things in the collective bargaining and benefits placed, particularly when our districts were financially struggling, long time changes that we were trying to get accomplished. Yet at the same time, over the number of years, maybe we didn't get the revenue for our schools that we had hoped for. We got policies that many would view as somewhat anti-public education or public schools, and so it's a mixed bag when you with each party. I would expect as we move into this new legislature, some of those same collective bargaining things that we accomplished in 2010 and 2012 now could be at jeopardy, because we have a very close working relationship in Lansing with the MEA and AFT. We'll be meeting with them before we get into January and talking about some of the things that they have interest in. We work collaboratively on most things here. And frankly, we agree on 90+% of education policy issues in the state. But that collective bargaining issue is going to be out there, and we know that. And we know with the one party control that we're going to be seeing in January that these are items that maybe not in January that we're going to be dealing with, but over time will come up. And but on the flip side, there will be other policy issues that we have not been able to get accomplished in many years that the new legislature will tackle, and we'll be very pleased with that. And so it's just a mix. Chandra, I don't know, if you have other thoughts that you'd like to add to what, I know you and lobbyists have been talking a lot about this in the last week.
I echo everything that you've said, Don. I think a lot of people are feeling like, yes, divided government was beneficial from a policy standpoint. Now that you have a Democratic majority, I know funding is also a major factor of, because we still have $6 billion on the state budget. So I know that's significantly one of the issues that people are talking about. Will you see more K-12 funding with the new legislature than you would have in previous legislatures because of the divided government? I've talked to a few of the lobbyists, and a lot of organizations, including MASB, are thinking of what's kind of on your wish list, the bigger items that you may not have been able to do in past years, specifically now that Prop 1 has passed, and you may have those legislators stick around for those 12 years in either chamber. Who's that champion? So who's that person that has the time and willing to work on it? Of course, that'll somewhat come down to committee assignments as well, but kind of we're doing the background work of maybe to see, and also leadership to see who will be our champion for certain issues that'll come up in the new legislature. But I've heard that the new legislature is specifically focusing on their first 100 days policy, and obviously the governor's budget usually comes out in the first 100 days. So that's where their focus is right now. So we'll see, and just kind of also no one really expected to have a Democratic majority, of course. So lame duck. I'll keep it brief because we do have a lame duck views webinar next week that hopefully all of you will be attending. But Also, it kind of changes the dynamic of what we were hearing for lame duck. I believe it will still be quiet. Maybe not a lot of bigger policy issues, maybe smaller policy issues that the governor will want to get done just to kind of, button up things at the end of the year. But I think you'll see more of a policy focus and funding focus with the new legislature.
Another one that was a campaign promise that MASB has its own issues with, that from both sides of the aisle. We as an organization, I always feel like the revenues that go into the school aid fund are ones that we want to protect at all cost. And particularly at a time when we can all advocate that we would be better off with additional revenues. And I know we're seeing the influx of federal revenues, but those are very limited in what you can spend. So we don't want to create holes right now and give money away or give money back to taxpayers because all this money is in schools. Well, it's federal money that will disappear, and we don't want to create an artificial, a hole down the road. And so, one issue that I expect that will probably be early in the session is the exemption on the pension tax that was created. It was done away with under Governor Snyder. And Governor Whitmer has campaigned on trying to repeal that, and Republicans have come out. I know in our congressional election where I live, our Republican candidate was running on, and current senator was running and saying, I support the repeal. So we will likely see, fairly early in the year, an attempt to repeal that tax or exemption on that tax. And we're probably going to see universal support across both parties on that, even though education is going to be saying, wait a second, it's upwards of $800 million. And there's no plan for replacement. Just because there's revenue coming in right now doesn't mean that we should necessarily go down that road. But there are very few elected officials that don't like a tax cut. It appeals to voters. And so, that argument we've made for years with the Republicanly controlled House and Senate looks like we're going to need to make that argument with a Democratically controlled House and Senate pretty quickly in the new year as well.
I think that's one thing you probably won't see during lame duck is a tax conversation, specifically now that there's a Democratic majority next year. I don't think the governor will come to the table, even negotiate. So that's one thing that I think will be off the table.
Great thing to bring up, Ken, so that we could cover it. Others, questions on kind of any areas that you're facing? Maybe it's something local that you're looking for, Brad or I or somebody to chime in on that's that you're just dealing with. I should look. I'm only looking at the front page of folks, and so others could raise their hand and I wouldn't see it.
They'll pop to the top, Don, if they raise their hand.
Oh, well, look at this. You'd think that after 2 years, I would know how Zoom works. I see somebody raise their hand, but the way that your name is entered, I can't tell who it is.
It's Angie Smith from Farmington Public Schools.
Hi, Angie.
Hi. To the young lady from Southfield, Oakland County is still, with us being big, the Oakland County Election Division will not have all of our certifications until November 23rd. They're still counting. So just so that you won't be nervous and upset and worried. So it should go through to your district in Southfield. It'll go to us in Farmington.
Angie, thanks so much. That's great information to share.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You just watch for the holiday across that period. If they finish the 23rd, you get the notifications the 27th, you're probably out of school on the 28th. Just
Yeah,
pay
it is
attention.
calendar days, not business days.
Yep.
Oh, Deshandra sent me a direct message and so yes, that's a good, Deshandra just brought up, as many of you know, there were petition signatures filed this fall to bring about what we've called school vouchers in Michigan. I know that it's set up as a tax deduction, but it creates a voucher in Michigan. Those were not filed in time to get to the ballot. So those signatures they've not went through the Secretary of State process for confirmation. The way that was done is as they circulated the petition, that would actually go directly to the legislature. Our expectation, though, based on the time frame, is that once the Secretary of State has to deal with, of course, all of the elections right now and getting to final resolution on those, that's going to take through the end of the month for sure. Then they would have to go through certification of the signatures. There will be challenges. So the short answer to a long question is we do not expect these signatures to be certified before the end of the calendar year. But we do expect them they still have to go through the process. And so what likely will happen is that verification process will take place. Maybe it'll start in December, but it'll complete in January, and that will be presented to the legislature. We do not anticipate, based on the fact that those bills went through the legislature and the governor vetoed them, that they will go anywhere with the new legislature. And what that will set up then is the signatures likely will be certified. They collected well in advance, in addition to what they needed. And that will put on the ballot in 2024 a question related to vouchers or tax credits for our Michigan voters. The group that collected the signatures, of course, can withdraw them at some point if they see fit to do so. There is, of course, the rumor mill runs rampant around Lansing. That could happen. They might do that. We don't know if that will be the case. I will tell you, at least if they were to go down that road, and you've looked at the election outcome here that we just most recently had, speculation and even commentary on this election is ballot issues matter to who's running for office. And so clearly, if you're reading articles on this, Proposal 3, all prognosticators, both parties are saying it had a significant impact on voter turnout and on the Democrats having the impact that they did in running for office. Quality candidates are issues. There's other things, but ballot issues matter. And I can go back, because Brad and I have been around forever, to 2000. And at that time, Governor John Engler was in his last term as governor, and Betsy DeVos, who's one of the people behind the signature collection this year, Betsy wanted to put vouchers on the ballot in 2000, and Governor Engler came out opposed to that. She was the Republican chair, state party chair at the time, and said, I oppose it. And it wasn't because John Engler necessarily opposed the idea of vouchers. He thought that on the ballot would hurt Republicans because of voter turnout. And he wasn't wrong. And so that becomes a consideration now, fresh off the heels of Proposal 3 and its impact on Republicans and Democrats. I think there are some conversation happenings that would say same kind of dynamic, different polling probably percentages, but the traditional supporters of Democrats and moderates and independents typically don't like the idea of taxpayer dollars going to privately funded education. And do they want in 2024 to put something on the ballot that might turn out again in high numbers? And of course, in that election, we're dealing with a presidential election where you have higher turnout to begin with. So we don't know if they will pull the signatures. We know that they've been filed. We do expect if they run them through the process, they will likely be certified. And then the legislature will have their time to act. We expect they won't act. And then they would go forward to the voters in 2024. So that one's out there. We just don't know where they're going to land on that one. So Deshandra, if I missed anything, correct me or fill in the gaps, but.
No, we are still collecting board resolutions on opposing the Let My Kids Learn initiative. We are still collecting those. So you still have time.
Thanks for reminding me on that. Brad, you got anything in closing to?
I don't. I was just going to add the Mackinac Center doesn't like our resolution that we came up with for that ballot proposal.
Yes, we did see a recent article. They don't like that we call it a voucher, but ultimately, if you take tax dollars away, whether it be through a tax credit or a tax deduction because of a donation, and I think right now we're at 28% of the income tax goes to school aid. You can't look at it in any way other than to say that will be a reduction in the amount of money available for schools in Michigan. And that's how our association looks at this, and we won't apologize for saying that it will negatively impact schools, and that although it may be called something different than a voucher, it has exactly the same impact from a negative piece to for our schools. So a good clarification. There was an article in their publication, I think earlier this week, it's, saying that about MASB and questioning the resolution. But so yes, that's a good thing to mention, but one that we're still encouraging members to do the resolution to send the message. Yes, that proposal does quack, Stan. I would agree. We're at 1 o'clock. I always try to keep this to the time frame that's there. We will keep these going in the new year. This will be another opportunity for you to encourage your new board members when we do these webinars to start attending in the new year, and another way to get them engaged with MASB and ask questions. And just keep in mind, we have a couple of things going on that will be helpful. I think we have an organizational meeting. I want to say webinar, but event tomorrow, Brad, or Thursday, because I know you're involved with that.
That is Thursday, and I'm not sure if we've maxed out on it yet, but it's in person, and I think we're getting kind of close to it.
Okay, so that's out there. We have a CBA weekend virtually in December. And then we are right now taking lots of requests for in-district workshops, roles and responsibilities, 101, all of the things you would expect for kind of the new beginning of the school year. And so, talk to us, send us an even if it's not like you want to schedule something with us, but you just want you want to talk and maybe figure out something in your head, but you want somebody to talk to you, reach out to anybody on our staff, reach out to me directly. Happy to have that conversation via phone call, via email, or whatever it is. Jill, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Just all these great links that Stacy has posted in the chat. How will those be available to members after this meeting, or will they?
Yeah, so this is being recorded and it gets posted on our website for people to be able to share with others that haven't seen this or haven't been able to participate. So, and the chat is a part of that recording. Good question, Jill. Good information to be able to share. And good job at correcting your spelling, Stan. All right, thanks everybody. Have a really great Thanksgiving next week, and we'll see all of you when we return in the new year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.